much for being here. This is really exciting because until today, all four of us haven't been in one room at the same time. And today is the first time that Angie and I have actually met in person, even though we've had plenty of phone calls and Zoom calls, et cetera. So this is excellent. Thank you. And many attempts, that's right. I know. You see how you can sometimes spend more time trying to find the meeting time than it actually takes to have the meeting. So Angie, I am going to start with you. I wanted to ask if you would share with everyone in the room your earliest or most memorable professional experience where gender bias really impacted you.
Okay, so I'll start. When I was thinking about the answer for this question, there's many examples, unfortunately or fortunately, that I can come up with, but I'll go with the first one. When I started, like my bio says, I started as a bottling maintenance supervisor. I was 23, fresh out of college, super young. So you're young and you're a female in a maintenance department, stigma, so to speak. And they had just promoted me shortly after I got there. They had promoted me to be the electrical supervisor. So I was in charge of electricians and pipe fitters and coppersmiths. And the BA for the union for the electricians, it's business agent, he came into my office, and he was a pretty intimidating guy, but over the years we got to respect each other. But he actually came in and he said, "I just want to let you know, I don't believe women should work." And I'm sitting here, okay, what do I do with that? I found out maybe like a week later that his wife actually worked in finished goods, so I knew that worked at home as well. But it took me a little bit to go like, okay, this is the environment I'm in, right? So this is what I have to play with. But like I said, that kind of shaped our relationship at the beginning, but it wasn't certainly how our relationship ended when I left. Mm-hmm. So,
what was the next day? What did that look like for you? Or kind of what was the inner monologue around how you kept coming back to work after that?
It was similar with all the rest of the electricians. They followed his suit. They followed him until they knew they could trust me. So it was really like every day I walk in there, I just have to show them that I was there to support them. I was there to make their lives better. I was there to, not tell them what to do, because I certainly didn't know what to do. It was more, how could I be of service to them? And then once I got their respect, and then it became more of like a teamwork, but it was every day trying to break that trust barrier. Mm. Yeah.
Tate, this next one's for you. Well, let me back up also and say, thinking about all of the other women that have had similar experiences and they didn't come back the next day, right? So it really speaks to raising girls, women, friends, et cetera, to have that strong inner monologue to say, okay, we're going to try this again tomorrow, and take every day kind of as its own tenacity, right? Tate, have you been met with skepticism over your qualifications as a woman leader in your family-owned business, especially coming from going into manufacturing from the fashion industry?
So the quick and easy answer to that is yes. I definitely did early on in my career, but I think, as with most things, it's much more nuanced than that. And I think part of that is I was skeptical myself, and I probably emoted that, and I think people saw that. And that's not to say that there weren't some, I got questions from the board, well, are you going to keep working after you have your kids, and are you coming back? And I think once we sort of got past those types of things, and I proved to the organization and our board of directors that I plan to be there and I plan to continue to work. And I will also admit that those types of questions absolutely happened in the fashion industry, if not more so than in the manufacturing industry, because it's very female dominated. So that's not just to pick on the manufacturing industry. But I joined the company 12 years ago, and it was a very big culture change, coming from a female dominated fashion industry in New York to a male dominated, highly technical work environment in north of Dayton. So there was a difference in culture shift, which I think I had to get comfortable with that. I had to get comfortable with our culture, with dealing with, highly technical people instead of fashion designers. That takes very different communication skills. That takes all different skills. And so I think it was a journey kind of for all of us, really. And so I don't feel that skepticism today, and I think some of that is a difference in growth in the industry within organization, and also the growth that I've done sort of myself to kind of kick the imposter syndrome, off my back and have the confidence to lead the organization.
That's big. Thank you. This one is for you, Jenna Lou. As a younger female leader in the manufacturing industry, where your colleagues, partners, and customers have decades of experience, how have you overcome challenges in establishing credibility to advancing your career?
Thank you, Elise. It's been about 10 years since I've been in the industry, and if you look at that photo, you might think I've only been around for about a day. And I'd say really the skill set I've learned over time is learning how to reframe the perception that people have about you and really lead with the value that you add to the organization, to your customers and your partners. You can't entirely control how people see you when you first walk into the room, and you can count on at least the mentors, hopefully, that you have and trusted advisors that you have to encourage you that you do have something to bring to the table, that you do have a seat at the table for a reason, and believe that you're there to improve or to implement solutions and really offer insights that nobody else in the room has. So lastly, I would say, if you're a mentor or a sponsor, or you have somebody in your organization that's an early career, mid-career that needs encouragement and a little bit of confidence, just remind them that they're there for a reason, they're hired for a reason by the company, and that they do have value to add to the table in the conversations.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Okay, so this one is for everyone. And honestly, the focus on the rest of the conversation today is really more about action and how can you make change, and how do we create those allies and sponsors within our organizations, within the industry. What are the things that we can do to help perpetuate that? So what are specific ways that men and allies can support women in business and manufacturing? What are some specific things that we could share that they could do?
I'll offer a comment here and then I'll pass it on to Tate and Angie. I think AJ's presentation highlighted that 63% of women at a minimum would stay at a company if they have mentors and sponsors and really opportunities to advance and perhaps take on complicated or more complex projects than their role derives today. So if you're sitting in a room and you're looking for opportunities for your female colleagues or your employees to have a better experience, I would say if you don't have a mentorship program, that's a good place to start. And I do want to clarify, don't just assign a mentor and then forget about that relationship. I think it's helpful to have milestone check-ins. Having a mentor is like almost dating. You have to work through the chemistry, and it has to be right for both individuals for that to work. And if you're a people manager who just assigned a mentor to someone and it didn't work out, don't assume that that individual, the mentee, is actually getting value out of the relationship. So I think it's okay to challenge the existing mentorships and really challenge that the people that you're selecting are adding value bidirectionally to the relationship that you're forming.
I'll add to that and also just say that I think, particularly in some of our smaller organizations, we may not have the ability to marry mentors as well to some of our new employees, particularly if your female workforce is small, or if you're working on being more inclusive in all the different ways we can be inclusive. And so encouraging networking with organizations that support your industries, because you may not have the right people internally to be the great mentors. And so encourage the networking at, in Cincinnati would be in Dayton, the DRMA, or with OMA, or at an event like today, and even through community service opportunities. one of our core values is partnership. And so with that, it means we do a lot of community involvement. And so even with that, mentoring, I think, is important also for having adult mentors within your organization or within the network that's available to your organization. But also, I'm a student mentor, and even for me, that's so incredibly empowering to almost be a reminder, not only of what I'm doing and what I can offer people, even if it's, a 10-year-old versus an adult within the manufacturing industry or in the workplace. So the mentoring doesn't necessarily have to be something that's within your walls. But also, I think in terms of support, on one hand, we go back to the golden rule: just treat people the way you want to be treated, or the way you'd want your wife to be treated, or your daughter to be treated. And I know that I'm aware that the golden rule isn't what we're supposed to do anymore. We're supposed to treat people the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. So there's that nuance. But flexibility, again, is key, and that doesn't always necessarily mean that someone has to be able to work from home, but it means that we're family-friendly as organizations. Because as more women enter the workforce, there's also more load being put on the men in your workforce. And so supporting your families and your employees' families has to come to the men and the women. Because, as we said, or someone said earlier, maybe the mom does drop off in the morning and the dad has to come do pickup or whatever the case may be, because not every family has the opportunity to have grandma or someone else help with those things. So being as family friendly as we can with flex schedules and other things is really important, I think.
You raise a really good point about looking outside of your own organization if the balance is off, or regardless of the size of our organizations, being able to set up an external mentor-mentee relationship. All of us in this room have hundreds of professional contacts and relationships that we could leverage, that we could take advantage of for someone else. That really is what networking and connecting is about, is how do you pair others, how do you bring people together, that's a really good, I would say, response to a smaller company that might say, we just don't really have the head count, we don't have the capability to do that. You do. You just need to look outside of your own organization. It's great.
So I think the only thing I'd add to that is, so one, I didn't have any formal mentoring until about 5 years ago, working with the current company, and I've been in industry for 20 years. And the first time I had a formal female mentor was 2 years ago.
Wow.
So I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for all of the relationships that I had that are male, and some of them are in this room. It's not just mentoring, even though that is key, and I think that's going to drive our next generation. It's the relationships you have. It's the encouragement that you give to your colleagues. Just the simple things like, hey, I'm going to support you today. You're doing a great job. It's those little things just day in, day out that sometimes make the difference between someone just saying, forget it, I'm done, I'm going somewhere else, or I'm going to try again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's those small deposits that really add up, right? What can we do as women to advocate for ourselves in the workplace?
So I think, and it's been, I kind of feel like an imposter just saying this because I haven't been clear about it myself necessarily over the years, but really understanding what you need and what you want and being clear about that with your manager. Today you can do that. I felt like that I wasn't necessarily able to do that 20 years ago. But today I think there's a lot more openness to that in industry, and there's certainly the job markets out there. But I think being very clear about what do I need at home and what do I want? What do I want out of my career? And to, understand that there are seasons in life, and some seasons you're going to be that rock star, you're going to be that A+, and some seasons you're going to have to take a back seat, and that's okay. So give yourself a little bit of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
To add to Angie's point, that I think the encouragement that you get from your mentors is one piece. The toughest thing to figure out is really, as you stated, what you want, and then how to articulate to the company or the leader that you're with exactly what that is. And only in the past 2 to 3 years have I learned to look at role models within the company or even outside of the company. So very specific roles that I admire in order to then potentially map out how I can get there myself. Because it's so easy for us to say, just figure out what you want and then just tell the company that this is the role that you want. But the map and the architecture of selecting the projects that you need to get there, of picking out the trusted advisors that can guide you to get there is really the hardest. And so I think all of us can likely look around and say, hey, that person that I work with seems to have a really awesome job and they're really excellent at it. How do I get there? And maybe understanding from their perspective, what did that roadmap look like? Understanding that everybody would have a different road to get there in their careers. But I think having at least an idea of that's a great person or a role model, regardless if it's male or female, and the title in the company that you're aspiring to be would be a good place to start.
I'll add to this, and AJ touched on this a little bit in her presentation, and I don't remember the statistic exactly, but it had to do with the fact that if a man looks at a job description and is capable for, well, maybe 60% was the number, he'll fill out the application, and a woman feels much more that it has to be the full amount. And so I think it's important for a lot of women to be aware of that, and also HR managers to be aware of that. And as AJ said, make sure that what's in your job description really is reflective of the needs, or outline must-haves or would be nice to haves in your job descriptions. And that will also help women, particularly in large organizations, I think, grow within their organizations too. And I think through that as well, and some of it, I think, is some of the same mindset, but stereotypically, women do not fight for themselves on bonuses or pay increases the way men do. I'm sure there's a statistic about it. I don't know the statistic, but I definitely know that I've seen this with even my friends, particularly some who work for some of the larger companies within Cincinnati. And what happens is their male counterparts wind up making more money than them because they fought for themselves and they asked for the bonus and they asked for the pay raise. And the women traditionally, stereotypically, obviously this doesn't speak for everybody, go into the review and they get their points and they get their bonus and they say, thank you very much. And they walk out and either are happy or go home and complain, but then find out later that their male counterpart's making more money. So definitely, I think women in general and moms and dads, teach your children to negotiate for themselves, to fight for themselves, to ask the question, be within reason, of course. I mean, there's plenty wage surveys that come out that you can have an idea of where you should be and know those numbers and fight for yourself and ask for it. The worst thing that happens is they're going to say no. If you are a valuable person in your organization, you're definitely not going to get kicked to the curb for asking the question. So fighting for yourself, I think, is really kind of my biggest piece of advice to give anyone, really. It's not just to women, but I mean, my dad always said, if you're not going to negotiate for yourself, you're not going to negotiate for the company. And so he always said when he was hiring people, he wanted to see if people were going to negotiate for themselves. And I sort of do that in hiring too, particularly even if we're hiring buyers or someone else. I think we need them to negotiate price for the company. We need them to negotiate lead time. I want to see if they're going to negotiate in the onboarding process. And I'm shocked at the number of people who don't do it. And I think, you're leaving things on the table. What are you not doing? So train your workforce, train your children, train your friends, fight for themselves at all times, with respect, of course.
We touched a bit on, creating and having allies within the organization, but something that I don't think I really figured out the nuance and the importance of, even though it might have been happening through my career, was truly the idea of sponsorship and how that really looks different. And to have a sponsor within the organization who, in a meeting when you're not there, right? We talked about that. When you're not present, someone that speaks positively on your behalf because they believe in you, right? And understanding that we all can and do have sponsors within your own organization, and to really nurture that sponsorship and to understand the power of someone's positive word about you when you're not in the room, right? That's great. So on the topic of, unconscious bias, the places we go, right? When we think about progress, what does progress look like to you? When AJ was talking about, earlier Nimba was talking about, what does that end state look like, in creating that end state in your head in order to figure out what your journey looks like. What does a farther state look like? There's no end state, I guess.
Right. No, there's no end state. Do you mean me personally or sort of women in the industry in general? Or either?
Both.
Yeah.
Either.
I mean, the easiest answer to that is really just the statistics. We are all aware that a lot of women dropped out of the workforce during COVID, and I think there's a lot of people really working to change that, particularly because, as we all know, hiring is the number one problem, the number one issue. So if we can get more women back in the workforce, it's going to help all of us. And then the more allies we have within the workforce and within the industry, people are more comfortable to be there. And if you're more comfortable, you're going to work harder and you're going to be more productive. So the statistics, I think, sort of speak for themselves, particularly within progress. And that also goes for company policies. I mean, we've definitely seen more companies through the years implement different maternity leave policies, now paternity leave policies. I mean, paternity leave was not a thing, at least in any company I worked for. I will rephrase that. My husband had paternity leave, no one took it, and it was very frowned upon to take it. And when my brother-in-law took paternity leave, we basically told him it was career suicide, and shame on us, we were wrong. I mean, now that isn't, the same taboo as it once was. So, I mean, company policies and statistics in themselves really speak to the progress that the industry and that businesses are making.
Success relative to unconscious bias is so difficult to define because I think most people have a negative connotation regarding what bias really means. And I think we need to start first and foremost to accept that bias is a biological framework that we all operate with. And it's not good or bad, but it's just something to be aware. And to me, success means we're not reacting negatively to people's biases against us, but it's responding appropriately to reframe that bias towards you and potentially prove the other person wrong, or at least prove that what they initially thought about you is not entirely true. I think all of us here know we arrive at our workplace as a person, and it's challenging when you have to prove other people wrong or change their minds, and I think that's a lot of work to do. So I think accepting first and foremost that bias is a natural occurrence for all of us, male, female, and really everybody that you interact with, and then just agree to control and not to control how other people see you, but instead control how you respond to other people.
That's really great. I like that. Mine kind of fits with yours a little bit, Jen Luke. So I think nirvana for me would be if in every interaction, every meeting, every conversation that you have in a mixed group, whether it's one-on-one or a mixed group of folks, ideas are shared, people are curious, people are willing to, and they're open to challenge, and people aren't afraid of that challenge, and we're all just willing to learn more. We talk a lot in AstraZeneca about speak up culture. We talk a lot about trying to create safe environments for people to disagree, to fail. If every, and we've got a lot of work to do, but we talk about it and we're working towards it. If every conversation you had, if every company out there was working towards that, because every person you hire, whether they're the technician on the floor, the janitor, all the way up to the CEO, they've got a different perspective and they're there for a reason. So empower that, right? And if you can get everybody marching in the direction, look at what you could do.
So, I love this question. This is my favorite question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, the mom guilt. Yeah.
My daughter was here earlier. I wish she, yeah. Oh, she's back. They're both back. Awesome.
Yeah. My husband, God love him, he and I both worked, thankfully because of planning and everything, he was able to retire a couple of years ago, so he's home with our 4 children. But early on, for a good portion of our marriage, there was 2 engineering, manufacturing careers in the house, 24/7 manufacturing, right? So we were both on call. We were both, thankfully, I have no idea how, I think it was the grace of God, we didn't get called in on the same night. But those early days, especially with my older 2, I know that I beat myself up a lot about not being, missing this, missing that, or not being home for dinner. My kids don't know. They know that I love them. They knew I worked hard, and they know that I still work hard, but they don't know those details. And I think if I could go back, I'd be like, chill, it's okay. They will be okay, and you will be okay. Yeah.
Mine would have to be relative to self-confidence. I would tell myself about, if I were 10 years younger, there's really 2 voices in your head. There's a very encouraging, courageous voice, and there's also a very loud and nagging voice that says, you really can't do this. I don't know if you really want to go after this, and I'm not sure if you really know what you're doing. I would say tune out the latter voice, the one that's not really serving you. You can't really entirely remove it from your mind, but I think you can, like a knob, just turn it down in moments where it really matters. And the last thing that I would say is, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to work really hard and not give up, regardless of what it is that you're going after.
That's good.
So just a little tidbit about the voices. I have a long commute and I listen to podcasts all the time. So if anyone wants to know anything about podcasts, talk to me, because I know many of them. But Hidden Brain just did one about the voice in your head. So if you haven't listened to that and you have that voice, we all have that voice. Some people can ignore it better than others, but I suggest you listen to that. But in terms of advice, I really have 2 pieces, and one of which Angie touched on a little earlier, and that's about the season of things, and how sometimes you could be the A+ player, and then something's going on in your personal life or your work life or your family life or whatever the case may be, and you're not always going to be able to give that same drive. And I didn't understand, I guess I just didn't quite understand what that seasonality of having kids was going to be. I mean, I sort of thought that I worked hard in my 20s, and that was when I had the time to really push in my career. And then I had my kids, and then it was time to be a mom and focus on them. And then my youngest went to kindergarten, and I was like, wait a minute. I can push again. I can do this again. And so recognizing that there can be a seasonality, and that if you have to step back at some point, that doesn't dictate your future, I think is incredibly empowering. And I think it's also important for employers to know that about your employees as well, that just because someone was really pushing at one point and then had to step back a little bit doesn't mean that they're never going to be ready again to push hard for your organization and for themselves. There really is a seasonality of things, particularly I think for moms, maybe more so than at least married dads. And so that's okay. And so, to even see that as a bright point and be excited about that would have been some good awareness for me. I mean, my mom was not a working out of the house mom, so I didn't have that example. The other thing is just, your comfort zone will kill you. So constantly push, constantly be pushing things. And someone else earlier today, I think it was Megan, said the 1% every day, and it's Atomic Habits. Great book. If you haven't read it, read that. But 1% every day to just make yourself a little better and to constantly push, because that's where we're going to grow. And growing really is so empowering on a personal level and for your job as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. I think we're going to turn it over to any questions that the audience has. And just really want to thank the 3 of you for being here today. It's been so great. Just see
day's
your
been
face.
great.
It has been a great day.
I've taken away so many tidbits, so many more than I thought I would from today. I mean, from this panel alone, from the speakers this morning, everyone's really been awesome. So
It's been great.
great work. You did a lot of this.
There's a lot of people behind this. This is not my show. Oh. Yeah. Couple hands.
Fantastic panel. I really appreciate it. Jake Hall, I have 2 daughters at home, a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter. So just as a father, what are things that I can do to help enable my daughters at such a young age? One of the questions that came up was by, 8th grade, when the girls hit puberty, they're going to decide, what they want to go into. If they're going to either do STEM or they're not going to do STEM. What can I do as a father that's going to be encouraging them? What have you seen successful that has helped transform young girls into this career?
I think really anything that's going to foster curiosity. And also, we sort of even talked about a little bit about this earlier. I mean, to me, manufacturing is adult Lego. I walk into our staging area where we have tons of parts and I'm like, this is so fun. I mean, so for me, it's not, I'm not a machinist, I'm not an engineer, but I get to see parts and think about how they're going to go together. And I loved Lego as a kid. So, and to be a woman in manufacturing, particularly someone who's not technical, I think it's also important, and I'm sure you do this in your work, is to say that you can be a marketing person in manufacturing and you can be the finance person in manufacturing, and you're going to get the benefit of all of those things within manufacturing. So, you even said it before, it's not the dark, dirty industry that it used to be. That's that gap between the STEM jobs and the manufacturing jobs is sort of bridging that and closing that and talking about the exciting things. I mean, because we all have, I shouldn't say we all have kids, but those of us who have kids, probably they're stuck to their iPhones or they're stuck to their Xboxes, and someone had to make those things and someone had to invent those things. My son said to me the other day, like, why do we have to go to school? I said, because you've got to learn and you're eventually going to have to get out of my house. He's like, but all the inventions have already been made. And I was like, oh, no. I said, no one thought about the iPhone before it was made. No one thought about the rocket ship before it was made. Like, that's your job. You have to go do that now. So anything that's going to sort of foster that and empower that within kids, I think is going to help get them in the industry, and then finding ways to actually get them in the industry as well, get them in the doors. And with Manufacturing Day, that's a whole lot easier than it was, say, 10 years ago.
So I have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old girl, and then a 7-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. So we have a little bit of an advantage because both of us are engineers. So we talk in math, right? We geek out a little bit. We do overemphasize the necessity for them to be strong in math and science because we believe that's where their strengths lie. That's probably a little weighted in our home over other things. But I'll say a lot of the things that we've done and what my husband has done is he's really shown like the curiosity of things, right? So if the bicycle breaks, he's got the kids out there if they're around, right? If they're not off playing soccer or whatever. But if they're around, he's got them there right next to him, tearing it down, putting it back together, right? How does this work? We have a rock tumbler at home. Oh my gosh, this thing's been running for a month. But now we know it's a slow process. But now we know how that all works. So it's just those little things that we've done over the years that, there's all those science gadgets out there and Legos are a big thing in our house. Our basement's full of them. So yeah, anything you can do to just show kids, like, how's this work? They'd love it, yeah.
You know what else works? Tell them not to go into manufacturing. Go right to it.
Any other audience questions?
Fantastic discussion. I appreciate all of you. Angie started off with talking about servant leadership, and all of the best leaders that I have had have demonstrated that to a great degree. Then there's also the seemingly opposite side of the coin, which is if you want to progress, if you want to have a successful career, you have to vet for yourself, which is, leaning toward the selfish side of things. Do you have any advice on how to manage the right balance between servant leadership, but also doing right by yourself and helping yourself grow and progress?
So just in the last, it's a great question. Just in the last 2 years, last 2 years has been quite transformative for my career. What I'll say is that servant leadership never ends. It never goes away. If you truly believe in servant leadership, it's about the relationships that you create as you go, right? You're going to take care of those people that are working for you day in, day out. It's the mentoring and the side what's my next step? Who am I going to serve next? Those conversations are when you're going to have to sit down and go, okay, what do I want? What do I need to keep going? That doesn't take away from I'm taking care of the team that reports to me. I'm taking care of the team that I'm serving. It enhances it, right? And in fact, being a true servant leader, if you're in the right culture, they'll see that as what they want, right? And they'll want that on another team. So it's a bit fulfilling your own prophecy. If you take care of your teams, those teams will take care of you, and the people above you or around you, wherever you want to go, they'll see that and they'll pluck you up and take you.
There's a female mentor that I have that mentioned recently, leadership is not about you, but it starts with you. And I think there's a difference, there's a stark contrast between having influence, power as a leader versus just having power in general. It seems that people that, as you stated, contradictorily would care more about themselves are those that are drawn more towards power over their team, whereas true leaders, servant leaders, would in fact really care more about the team members and the results that they drive, and really set themselves apart and say, not have the focus on them as a person, as a leader, but really it's about the team and the results that you're leading with.
I have it. How do you balance being a woman manufacturing leader and a manufacturing leader that happens to be a woman?
It's a very difficult question to answer. I would say that when I have mentees approach me and ask, a similar question about how do you present yourself at work, I always lead with the work that you do and lead with the results that you drive. And often we can get into our own heads and say, I'm a female, I'm the only female in the room. But the reality is, other people might be thinking that, but it really doesn't matter. So long as you're adding the value that you're there to add, and intuitively that you do have insights to share and that you do drive results. So I think a little bit of that is self-confidence in order to make it past the I'm a female leader and really just approach work and think about I'm here to lead today, regardless of what gender you're in.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is it's taken time to get there, and 20 years-ish, maybe 18. But it's taken a few years for me to get to where that's just, a descriptor, just like I'm white, I'm from Ohio. Those are just descriptors. It's also helpful that I'm in a company that they promote female leadership, but they don't define me as a female leader. It's a lot different than a company I came from before, where I was the only woman and it was obvious, and why do you even want to be here? So I think that's a big piece of it. But for me, I think the experience and just growing and realizing that doesn't matter, as you say, that does not matter anymore. Yeah.
I would pretty much say the same thing. I mean, I would almost even say until recently, it almost didn't matter. And now that I think there is more of a focus on D&I, it's become more of a thing, which actually I feel like has almost just increased my toolbox. Like now I have a superpower that I didn't realize I had before. Or now I can realize that that voice that I have because I'm a woman can be used in a certain place to empower people where before I may not have even thought about it. So, I mean, it's definitely just part of the toolbox that, yeah, I hope to use for good.